Good morning. Uh, Among Portuguese jurists of the 17th century, Manuel Álvares Pegas, 1635-1696, probably was one of the best known. Unlike most of his contemporary jurists of comparable fame, often judges of Portuguese highest court, Casa da Suplicação de Lisboa, professors of the only law school of the kingdom, or both, his professional activities were connected to the advocacy, to which he dedicated almost 4 decades from his graduation in 1658 until his death. Diogo Barbosa Machado reported the success of Pegas' career as lawyer, but he emphasized the relevance of his juridical writings, which could be reduced when he said that there was no controversial question among important litigants in ecclesiastical and secular jurisdiction in which his flight feather were not seeked by the most solid rules of law. A review of the published works of Pegas demonstrates that he cultivated almost all genres of juridical literature of the Ius Communi. Probably the most influential text was the Commentaria in Ordinationes Regni Portugalia, whose 14 volumes do not approach the Portuguese general laws, Ordenações do Reino, in its fullness, but only its first two books. Pegas wrote also monographic works, Tratatus de Maioratus, and Resoluciones Forenses. Amid his large production, this paper discusses an aspect, the role of foreign law, in a very precise work written by Pegas, the Alegação de Direito por parte do Excelentíssimo Senhor Dom Pedro de Menezes sobre a sucessão do título e estado de Vila Real e morgados da dita casa e bens patrimoniais que a ela pertencem e ao dito senhor sucessor de ela. A text identified with a gender about there was not enough secondary literature in Portuguese case. That demonstrates clearly the typical terms of the way Pegas, a classical representative of the jurist's model in the Ius Communi, dealt with juridical problems. He set out with particular cases and built a topic argumentative within he could justify a probable solution to the problem with no apparent intention to extend this solution to either cases nor analyze it in a systematic perspective. A clear intention of dealing with particular cases could be observed in what Otto Gerke called Entscheidungsliteratur, a generic concept that addressed both Concilia, Consiliensammlungen, and Decisiones, Rechtsprechungssammlungen, were addressed. Both had the same feature of proposing a solution for a concrete problem, which was exactly the point of departure of every argumentative unity of the book, Decisio, Concilia, or Consultatio, and often had its origin in forensic practice. In the Decisiones, about what I have already written a monography, these authors, often judges, intended to reason solutions to questions faced by courts. Therefore, it is possible to say that the arguments were foremost thought by judges to convince his colleagues about the correctness of the proposed solution. The allegaciones are quite connected to this perspective, but some differences are noticeable. Despite its close relation to forensic practice and its structural role in the arguments of casuistry and concrete problems, allegaciones were not written with the aim of providing a decision, but with the intention of convincing somebody who was endowed with arbitrium and power of deciding. Like some concilia, allegaciones authors were lawyers, but in concilia their role was precisely giving an answer, responsa, to the question. Their opinion was external to the problem and were enough powerful to constitute a solution to the controversy. In the allegaciones, the author was an intern participant of the question and had not the same position of the receiver of the text. He was a lawyer contracted to defend a point of view and had no impartiality. That is the reason why Marascheri described the allegaciones as defensive memories of lawyers, what emphasized its forensic origin and the argument's partiality, as well as its position as the gender of juridical literature in the Ius Communi with the closest relations to forensic practice and advocacy. As their aim was to convince judges about the correctness of their argument, the authors of allegaciones must construct a very well-reasoned text, actually, a better text than the one presented by the other litigant. To do so, they must use everything that could be that could persuade the reader. In previous works, I have analyzed Portuguese decisiones literature regarding how some elements, case law, statutes, and authority of jurists acted in the formation of the argument in each decisio. The same analysis can be done with alegaciones, but considering the limits and the objective of this paper, one precise point should be highlighted: the role of foreign law in the argument's construction in the alegatio. Foreign law and its use. During the age of jus commune, differences between the nationality of authors or books and the context in which the texts were applied were not a problem in most cases. From what is commonly called rebirth of jurisprudence around 11th and 12th centuries until at least 17th and 18th centuries, factors like the similarity of the university's curricula, the use of Latin as a lingua franca, or knowledge, and the wide circulation of ideas and works of some jurists have contributed to create an ambience in which there were few differences, especially but not exclusive in private law in most of Western Europe. Despite the criticism to the perception of the jus commune and its relations to particular laws, in part of European legal historiography in the second half of the 20th century, the material collected among Portuguese jurists constitutes evidences that, at least until the 17th century, the great majority of quoted jurists were not Portuguese. That was a matter of authority. Bartolus Baldus, Alexander Tartanius, Filippo Decius, Jacobo Menocchio, among others, were quoted, and their opinions were useful because of their importance to the jus commune and precisely opinio communis. Relating how an author's opinion became endowed with authority goes beyond the objectives of this paper. The authority's undeniable character can be seen otherwise when, for example, Portuguese general law, Ordenações do Reino, recognized as formal source of law in Book 3, Title 64, Paragraph 1, the opinions of Accursius and Bartolus. There was no similar measure for the opinion of Portuguese jurists, what proves that the authority was not related to nationality. Despite the close relations and interactions between particular laws and jus commune, the differences amid legal systems were noticeable. Legal pluralism, guaranteed heterogeneity, and the coexistence of many legal systems in the same territory, because the space of each legal system could coincide with the space of others' legal system, including in the same territory. With national laws, jus patrium, or more precisely, jus regnum, in the terms proposed by Italo Birocchi, the interaction appeared in a different way. Foreign law was used by national courts, as the works of Doshi, Bryson, and Mirov had demonstrated. But except with the opinion of foreign authors, it was not that common. Considering the use of statutes and judicial decisions of other states in Portuguese decisiones literature, it is perceptible that in the few cases it happened, the quotation was indirect, often through decisiones books whose authors came from other countries. As the main feature of the alegaciones was exactly being a lawyer's trail brief and acting these works as documents in which the argument must be enough strong to convince the judges to whom it was dedicated, arguments such as those picked up from foreign law are found. In the following pages, the use of foreign law in Pegas alegaciones will become clear. An overview of the alegação de direito por parte do excelentíssimo senhor Dom Pedro de Menezes. According to the literature review conducted by Diego Barbosa Machado in the 18th century, Pegas has published 9 alegaciones during his lifetime, and 4 of them were reprinted in Lisbon in 1728 under the title Alegações de Direito. The text here studied is one of the reprinted, although the year of the first publication was not indicated in its cover. Like 3 of the 4 books in the 1728 edition, the Alegação de Direito por parte do excelentíssimo senhor Dom Pedro de Menezes dealt with issues on maioratos and their succession. Specifically in this case, Pegas discussed the succession of a land called Casa de Vila Real, which allegedly would be up to Dom Pedro de Menezes, the litigant that contracted Pegas to be his lawyer. The succession included not only the land itself, but also the maioratus, the jurisdiction over the land, the privileges, and all the goods attached to the property, as well as the title of Marquis of Vila Real. Against the succession rights of Dom Pedro de Menezes raised both the Portuguese crown and the Count of Castanheira, a nobleman with interest in the land. The controversies related to the foreign origins of the rights over the land, which were based on a royal donation dated of the beginning of the 14th century and submitted to the general rules of succession of royal goods, the Mental Act, Lei Mental. Once these rules would be applied to the case, Dom Pedro de Menezes would not be considered the legitimate heir because he was descendant in a female line of the original landowner, the Count of Vila Real. According to the Mental Act, no women could be donee of a royal good in the kingdom. Pegas did not deny the familiar origins of Dom Pedro de Menezes. According to his proposal, the Casa de Vila Real and the rights over there and other lands, especially over the lands of Leiria, should not be considered royal goods and consequently not ruled by Mental Act, but a patrimonial maioratus submitted to the general rules of succession described in Ordenações do Reino, Book 4, Title 100. With the acceptance of Pegas' arguments by the court, Dom Pedro de Menezes would be restored as owner of the land. But it didn't happen. How foreign law appeared in the text. The short description of the book's content suffices the objective of this paper, which is to understand how foreign law was used by Pegas, and then to comprehend the role of what was above explained as foreign law is much more important than to analyze the arguments presented by the author. Statutory law, case law, and authority of justice, the three elements in which foreign law materializes itself, will guide this moment of the paper. In many moments of the text, Pegas compared the Portuguese laws about maioratus and royal donation with Castilian laws. That happened with one of the most important arguments of the text, when he argued that the rules of mental law, as well as its Castilian parallel, should not be applied to royal donations after converted into an onerous contract. Then the lands of Leiria were object of a bilateral